mean to be a god.
I was recently among the numerous adults flooding into the theaters to catch the latest live-action He-Man Masters of the Universe film. Looking around, I once again got the sense of just how many of us had grown up in that era, and how many of our lives this iconic franchise had touched. Without spoiling anything, I feel like this is a movie you need to watch, not just as a fan, but also if you're someone looking for something to lose yourself in for a couple of hours, without thinking too hard. And I mean that in the best possible way. I think it's fair to say that this movie surprised me with just how good it actually ended up being. And from the sound of things, I wasn't the only one. I had barely reached home from the theater when news began to swirl about a sequel already being underway. So I did some digging, and boy have I got some news for you. In this video, I'll be exploring everything we know about this sequel, from its characters, plot, main villain, and more. So be sure to stick around with me right to the end of the video. Now without further ado, by the power of Grayskull, let's begin!
This is my home. I'm gonna fight for it, but I can't do it without you.
Why is a sequel already being talked about? The curtains have already dropped on the He-Man Masters of the Universe film, and lo and behold, there's already talks about a sequel afloat. I'm happy to tell you though, unlike most similar instances, this news is not based on conjecture or rumors floating around the internet. This time around, the news for a sequel comes directly from the horse's mouth, as director Travis Knight, I believe, has gone on record confirming the fact that the plans to expand the Masters of the Universe for the big screen has already been laid out, and let me tell you, there's a lot to look forward to. From what he's revealed so far, He-Man and the Masters of the Universe is a well-loved franchise globally, so when a new film set in this universe was announced, I was cautiously optimistic, having been let down by such projects before. You know what they say, once burnt, twice shy. However, the film has been receiving pretty positive reviews from critics everywhere, with one of them even comparing this movie's vibes and success to that of Guardians of the Galaxy, which was also a surprise hit. I, however, don't feel like that this He-Man flick has come anywhere close to replicating the success of James Gunn's Guardians of the Galaxies, but that's not me taking anything away from it. It's the God's honest truth that He-Man Masters of the Universe turned out to be a much better film than anyone ever anticipated, and this is reflected in the reviews by critics. For instance, the Deadline said, "Travis Knight makes sure this is a loving return to a property that still provides a good time at the movies, and a reason to stay through the end credits." Meanwhile, The Hollywood Reporter had this to say, "Masters of the Universe touches all the fan-serving bases, with a fun cameo by a certain star of a previous film incarnation, and enough post-credit sequences to guarantee several sequels." Most importantly, the fans seem to have loved it, which is no surprise, because speaking from my own experience, a lot of us grew up with this franchise, and it's done somewhat faithfully in a campy sort of way. The money was never an issue here with regards to the film getting a sequel, since it's backed by the likes of Amazon MGM Studios. The deciding factor, I think, was always going to be its reception, and there He-Man and the Masters of the Universe has checked all the boxes. So it's a no-brainer for all parties involved to make a sequel for it, and that's exactly what's happening. Travis Knight and Nicholas Galitzine have already laid it out. I came across an interview that both Travis Knight and Nicholas Galitzine had done even prior to the film's release, in which they had expressed their excitement to do the sequel. Travis said, "Look, it's a big world. These are amazing characters, there are so many stories to tell, and we gave everything we could do to this movie, but there's many stories to tell, and if the world demands more, we'd be more than happy to give it." Well, I think it's fair to say that the world does demand more, and it looks like we're going to be getting it. From what Travis says here about there being so many stories to tell, I feel like he's setting up for a multi-film franchise, if everything goes according to plan. Nicholas Galitzine, the actor who plays the titular character, also chimed in, saying, "We see a little bit in the movie what happens when someone experiences hubris, and I think that's a very fascinating thing to play. And so there are just so many different ways we can go and so many different characters that are introduced as well, which is quite exciting. From the look of things, this sentiment of creating a sequel or series of films seems to be a sentiment held not just by the director but also the lead actor and the rest of the cast and crew. As a long-term He-Man fan, I'm just glad that the franchise seems to be in the hands of those that are genuinely passionate about bringing this epic saga to the big screen, instead of being there just to make a quick buck. With sequels being confirmed now, I can't wait to see what these other characters and stories are that both Travis and Nicholas were so excited to share with us in the future. She-Ra is the big confirmed hook. One of these characters that they were both excited to bring to the audience, it turns out, is none other than She-Ra. How do I know this, besides Knight's own words? Well, the character actually appears in one of the post-credit scenes after the actual movie is done. We don't really get to see her from the front, but that's definitely her in that comic-accurate costume with her iconic sword of protection. According to Travis Knight, She-Ra will, in his words, play a huge part in the next film. Honestly, I think they couldn't have picked a better character for the next film, because her introduction greatly expands the He-Man mythos. She-Ra's true name is Princess Adora, and she too wields a sword of power similar to He-Man's called the Sword of Protection. And just like him, when she raises it and says the words, "For the honor of Grayskull," she's transformed into She-Ra. The sword grants her all sorts of crazy magical abilities like shapeshifting, healing, and energy projection, unlike He-Man's power sword. During the Great Rebellion, Adora is torn away from her family and raised by the evil Horde and rises through its ranks to become an officer in it. However, after meeting He-Man and learning the truth about everything, she defects to the side of good and takes her place beside her brother as the protector of Grayskull and Eternia. Everything certainly seems to be pointing this way because one of the characters in that post-credit scene refers to her as Force Master Adora, which was her rank within Hardok's evil horde. Actress Lauren Saliu has been confirmed to be playing this badass character. I, for one, have my fingers crossed. Oh, and did I mention she's also Prince Adam's long-lost twin sister? How the first film's ending sets up the sequel. Don't worry, I won't be spoiling anything for you here, but allow me to skirt around the ending of the first film to talk about what it exactly sets up for part 2. The general consensus seems to be that the narrative ending of this movie wants to explore the idea of what would happen if Skeletor actually won. Due to the way it ended, I think it's fair to say that the power balance in Eternia is at best undefined, with no side emerging as a clear victor. Skeletor and Evil Lyn have managed to establish a tyrannical stronghold, and the focus is definitely now shifted to Adam's quest to shatter it alongside his allies. With the introduction of She-Ra and the supposed big bad, which I'm going to talk about soon in this video, the scope of the sequel is going to be extremely huge in my opinion. No longer is it going to just be about a fight between the two groups over artifacts and ideology. This is going to be a full-scale war, which might even be cosmic in proportion depending on the character they introduce next. The stakes for this next film are definitely going to be off the charts, as everything indicates that it's not just the fate of Eternia that will be on the line. As mentioned earlier, in the quote by Travis Knight, he means to explore these tales through multiple films if possible, so I think we're in for one hell of a ride. The villain setup, Hordak, is the obvious next move. The supposed big bad that I said I was going to cover later in the video is none other than Hordak. This guy is basically the Morgoth to Skeletor's Sauron. If you didn't get my Lord of the Rings analogy, allow me to break it down for you in simpler terms. Hordak is basically Skeletor's mentor, who was the first big bad guy to threaten the peace of Eternia. In the Great Rebellion story, he's the one who kidnaps Princess Adora as an infant and raises her up to become one of his officers. One of the key things to note about this character is that he seems to rely more on science and technology, compared to Skeletor's magic, which might bring an extra layer to the film. Since I've mentioned earlier that She-Ra is definitely making it in the second film, I wouldn't be surprised to see Hordak joining the fray as well. Their stories, as I just explained, are intertwined with each other, and it would make sense for it to play out similarly on the big screen. Not that I'm tired of Skeletor, as he'll definitely be returning, given that you hear him cackling in the final post-credit scene with Evil Lyn picking up his skull. My guess is that she will manage to glue him back together for another round with He-Man in the sequel. However, regardless of his presence, the introduction of Hordak will definitely up the ante for the next movie in my opinion. The full cast already introduced. When asked about his philosophy behind casting Nicholas Galitzine, Travis Knight had this to say in an interview. "I wasn't looking for a body, I was looking for a soul. There's a duality there. Adam essentially represents empathy. He-Man represents strength. This philosophy of his clearly worked, as we got one of the best He-Man to date in my opinion in this movie. The supporting cast too has been cast excellently, with each member not just embracing, but embodying their roles. In my opinion, with the ending of the film setting up the sequel as discussed earlier, I think it's safe to say that most of the cast from the first film will be making a return to reprise their roles. As mentioned earlier, She-Ra is going to be played by Lauren Saliu. And for the other newer characters such as Orko, who by the way appears on the first post-credit scene, which confirms his place in the sequel, fans are saying they want Danny Pudi to play the tiny floating wizard. Yep, this movie has not one, not two, but 3 scenes after the actual movie ends. As for Hordak, the popular consensus seems to be Willem Dafoe. I think it'll be interesting to see if the fans get any of these right, and which actors actually appeal to Knight's deep philosophy regarding casting and gets one of these iconic roles. What can we actually expect from Part 2? Despite Travis Knight confirming that a sequel for He-Man Masters of the Universe is already in motion, I think realistically we'll still have to wait and see how the film performs in the opening weekend. So far, things are looking pretty optimistic, judging by the reactions of both fans and critics alike. However, in show business, money talks, and with a budget that's said to be around $200 million for this film, it'll need to talk a lot if we're gonna get those sequels that Travis Knight was talking about. I think they need to at least earn close to double that amount for the studios to begin setting things in motion for a sequel. If the first part is anything to go by, the second part looks like it'll be an absolute banger as well, that everyone in the family can enjoy. The stakes are going to be higher, the villains are going to be more evil, and it looks like He-Man and She-Ra are going to be having their work cut out for them. Given the timeline for how long films like this tend to take, if given the official green light, we'll probably get to see it in theaters by 2028 at the earliest, although announcements regarding any date have yet to be made. To conclude, I think that I speak for a lot of fans who grew up in the 80s and 90s, that I'm just glad to see the Masters of the Universe franchise going strong to this day. This film might not be winning any Oscars or setting the world on fire with a deep and engaging storyline, but what it did manage to do is awaken the child within me that grew up loving this series, and for its entire runtime. I felt like the movie was a love letter to all the fans of He-Man and this universe, and if it helps bring a newer generation of fans to this iconic franchise, then I think this He-Man Masters of the Universe film is already a success no matter what. Tell me your opinions on the film if you've watched it already. For now though, it's time to say goodbye. I hope to see you soon with the next one. Until then, stay safe and stay marvelous.